Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I am Mateo311 and today we are ranking over 30 flat screen to VR mods, plus checking out an additional 10 that are coming soon. Now before you ask, yes, some of these mods do work natively on your Quest. Before we get into it, I would love to know down in the comments what your favorite VR mod is, or any flat screen game you would love to see modded for VR. Today's ranking system will be based on the quality of the mod rather than the game itself, and it comes down to items like, is the mod free? Does it have full motion controller support? Should you keep a vomit bag available when you play? And is a NASA-grade supercomputer required to run the mod? Now, if you want to stay up to date on the latest mods, I highly recommend the flat screen to VR modding community Discord. It's linked down in the description and includes any additional information you may need. Now from here, we'll order mods by the least amount to most amount of coveted features. But before we jump in, do you know what else requires some modding? Your Quest 2. The flimsy strap that comes with this headset is just not cutting it. I recommend the Kiwi Elite strap that has this ultra plushiness right here on the top and back of your head. It's not going to randomly snap on you. And if you need a battery pack, they have one of those coming out soon too. There's also plenty of other accessories from Kiwi like controller weights, pulley systems, and much more. Don't forget to use the discount code Mateo311 for 5% off and to help support this channel. Now, first up are our C tier mods. Now, this in no way implies that they are actually bad mods. They're just trapped behind a paywall, do not feature motion controls, and they're not an in-engine modification, meaning they're usually harder to get running or have much higher system requirements. Now, on the topic of paywalls, I'm not saying these modders don't deserve to get paid for their amazing work. They absolutely do. But let's face it, the average person is going full stop once they hear paid mod. But at the same time, these are also some of the biggest AAA titles. First up is the RPG Elden Ring, where you get to take on the role of the victim. Currently one of the most popular games available, it's absolutely amazing that we can experience it from a VR perspective. High system specs and a strong stomach are recommended. And you might want to go ahead and add patience to that list, because this is, after all, Elden Ring with no compromises. Now, if Elden Ring is not your style, why not get into some organized crime with Mafia 1, 2, and 3? Once again, there are no motion controls, but there is head-based aiming. And if you are sensitive to motion sickness, you might have to look out for the driving sequences. If you're not familiar with the Mafia series, they play similar to Grand Theft Auto. And with 3 full titles to experience, there is a lot of action and storytelling to be had. Now, another amazing title with no motion controls, but also featuring head aiming, is Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon drops you into this beautiful world that's a combination of tribal humanity and futuristic technology. Getting to view these machines close up in VR is absolutely amazing, but again, you're going to want a pretty strong constitution and a pretty beefy gaming PC. Now we take that concept even further with Cyberpunk 2077. The visuals are absolutely stunning in VR, and you have an open world to experience unlike anything else. But those visuals do come at a price, and even on some of the beefiest rigs, you will want to adjust settings for maximum performance. Cutscenes and driving sequences will also be extremely tough if you're prone to motion sickness at all. And this same exact story continues with Red Dead Redemption 2. Once again, we have a top-notch AAA open world title, but again, it will push your system to the max, and those cutscenes are not easy to handle. So overall, on our tier C list of VR mods, if you're willing to spend a few bucks and become a Patreon to Luke Ross, you're getting access to some of the best AAA titles, which also happen to feature huge open worlds, spanning multiple different genres and time periods going back to Westerns all the way to the far future. But if you're not willing to spend any money, here is my tier B list of VR mods. Now, everything in the B class is free, but once again does not feature motion controls, nor is this an in-engine modification, so the initial setup might be a little cumbersome, or tweaking is required for optimal performance. First on this list is the brutally fantastic first-person shooter Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus. Now, this does feature head aiming, and there is a way to set up some form of hybrid controls, but it's just not the same feel you get from a native VR title. That being said, though, it's still an amazing experience, and if you've never played this game, you might want to make your first run in VR, because it's a mod and title that just shouldn't be missed. Another experience you might want to jump into is Grand Theft Auto 5. I'm sure the game itself needs no introduction, as most people have already ran through this giant open world committing countless crimes. On the other hand, we do need to talk about the mod a little bit. Once again, there are no motion controls, but there is head aiming. The overall setup can be a little cumbersome, and both cutscenes and driving sequences can be tough for people who suffer from motion sickness. But it's worth taking the risk to experience this giant city up close and personal. Okay, so that tier B list was quite short, and we're now moving into tier A, which are still free, but utilize an in-engine modification, which generally makes it easier to install or gives better performance. Sadly though, these mods still lack motion controls. First on the list is the spy-themed first-person shooter with stealth elements, No One Lives Forever. If you were a fan of this title and wanted to relive it, or if you're looking for new content to play, it is definitely worth checking out. Now, if you prefer a horror title, then you have to try Alien Isolation. The Mother VR mod can be absolutely terrifying, and there's nothing quite like playing cat and mouse with a xenomorph. The overall environments and lighting truly shine in VR, adding to that overall immersion. Now, if it only had full motion controller support, it would most likely be one of the best titles on this list. Now, another title that I'm yet to experience on either flat or in VR is Pray for the Gods. One of the few mods on the list that takes a third-person viewpoint rather than first-person actually ends up working extremely well because you get to take in the grand scale of the enemies. I currently have this one wishlisted and I'm just looking for some free time to get into it. Now, another VR mod I need to get into more is Mech Warrior 5. If Vox Machina wasn't enough for you, this VR mod is where it's at. Absolutely stunning graphics, but unfortunately, once again, no motion controller support. In fact, the developers recommend you use a HOTAS for this title, and I definitely agree with them on this one because it ups the overall immersion. Speaking of immersion, let's dive underwater with Subnautica Below Zero. This survival title is both stunning and addictive, and being in VR truly helps sell those alien environments. There are some experimental motion controls available, but you might have to default back to using a controller. Now, another title that brings you back into third-person mode is Devil May Cry 5. You'll still feel closer to the combat than you normally would in flat screen, and you get to look around and take in those beautiful environments. The lack of motion controls here isn't as big of a deal, as I couldn't really imagine how this game would play otherwise. Remaining in third-person mode, we have Monster Hunter Rise. In VR, the scale of these enemies feels much more imposing, and again, it's just much easier to take in the sights of this beautiful world. I would love to see a Monster Hunter title built from the ground up with VR mechanics, but for right now, this is good enough. But many of us are not willing to accept compromises, and that's why we have our Tier S VR mods. These are free native in-engine modifications that feature full motion controller support. And first on that list is Morrowind. This classic RPG sucked me in for countless hours, and now you can fully experience that world in VR. Yes, I know Skyrim is an option out there, but some people love the classics, and nostalgia is the main appeal here. And while we're on the topic of nostalgia, let's jump into the Resident Evil series. The absolutely fantastic remakes for Resident Evil 2 and 3 are now completely playable in VR, featuring full motion controls. But that's not all, because modders gave us something that Sony refused to do, and that's VR support for Resident Evil 7 on the PC. And taking it one step further, we can now play Resident Evil 8 in VR also. Now, just a side note, the motion controls for Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8 are currently in beta, but they're almost ready for full release, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're already available by the time you see this video. Not into horror, but looking for an epic storyline? Why not check out Life is Strange Before the Storm? Now, to some degree, the motion controls are kind of useless in this title, as it's an interactive story and you're just going around making choices. But at the same time, it's nice to keep that level of immersion and feel a bit more engrossed in this beautiful world. Now, a place where you will want to put your motion controls to use is Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. These were some of my absolute favorite Star Wars titles when I was younger, and the VR mod does them justice, and graphically they still look great. So go get your Jedi or Sith on, lightsaber your enemies, and unleash some force powers. So next up is our first quest title on the list, and that is Quake 3 Arena. How does intense online multiplayer, truckload of weapons, and a run speed of over 20 miles per hour sound? Well, if that's up your alley, then this classic title is for you. Quake was already full of adrenaline, but the VR perspective just brings it to the next level. But if multiplayer isn't your style and you want a single player experience, we have Return to Castle Wolfenstein and Doom 3, both playable on PC and the Quest, and you now have the option to take on some Nazis or legions of demons. But the classic single-player shooter that trumps them all is the original Half-Life. The VR implementation of this game is absolutely perfect, and replaying this game in VR was almost as exciting as my original experience. If you've never played Half-Life before, or even if you're a huge fan of the series, it is definitely worth revisiting in VR. Now, jumping back to PC, but still on the topic of Half-Life, we have Garry's Mod. The ultimate sandbox can now be experienced in VR, and it has a significant impact on the overall feel. Now, technically, you could use Garry's Mod to load up Half-Life 2 in VR, but you won't need to do that in the near future. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and we'll get back to this when we get to the list of upcoming mods. Now, one thing these VR mods have been missing is some co-op, so luckily we're breaking into a few of those titles, starting with GTFO. This horror-themed title requires nerves of steel and a lot of teamwork. Many of you might not want to see these horrific creatures up close and personal, but it's definitely one hell of an experience. Now, if the horror theme is too much for you, we have the action roguelite Risk of Rain 2. Move from third person right up into the action, fighting your way through hordes of frenzied monsters. Being able to bring your friends just adds to the action, and this is just an excellent title overall, flat screen or otherwise. And another extremely well-received title is Valheim. This epic open-world survival and crafting title was an absolute surprise hit when it released last year, and VR with full motion controls is an excellent option to fully immerse yourself in this title. And on the subject of getting fully immersed, we have the single-player, story-driven title Firewatch. Firewatch tells an extremely intriguing story, which gets a bit eerie at times. Anything like VR that immerses you more into this environment is a step in the right direction. Firewatch was another surprise hit title, and this list of mods that I just rattled off for you guys has something for everyone. But we're not done, because there are a lot more mods currently in development that I'm going to blast through rather quickly and give you some final notes on. First on the list is Borderlands 3, which I am extremely excited for. I'm currently playing it on my Steam Deck, and being able to join our friends online is something the official Borderlands VR title didn't give us the option to do, so I will definitely be jumping into that one. Additionally, we have Deep Rock Galactic, Doom Eternal, Ghost Runner, Left 4 Dead 2, Portal, The Stanley Parable, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and biggest of all, Half-Life 2. These mods are all in development in varying stages of completeness. I will say I have started the Half-Life 2 VR mod, and it is absolutely fantastic. And if you want more updates, again, there is a link in the description to help you follow all of these VR mods. Now, I hope this video gave you guys some new stuff to try out. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys on next time.